Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie taking the fight to former President Trump as he announced his candidacy for the 2024 GOP nomination this week. It comes as the former Vice President Mike Pence is also gearing up to make his own official announcement in Iowa. That's set for later this afternoon. Joining us this morning to talk more about a growing field of Republican candidates, Republican strategist Boyd Matheson. He also served as Chief of Staff to Senator Mike Lee of Utah and is a radio host in Salt Lake City. Good to see you as always, Boyd. So Chris Christie has tried this before, right? We've been to this show in 2016. How will round two against Donald Trump be different for Christie?
Well, I think there's two really interesting things with former Governor Christie's announcement there. One, he is going in saying, hey, I am the fighter who can take on the former president. He's been touting that he will do to President Trump what he did to Marco Rubio back in 2016. I think it's important to note, though, in that famous debate where he did go after Marco Rubio, it was 2 days after that debate that Chris Christie dropped out of the race after finishing 10th in Iowa and 6th in New Hampshire. Marco Rubio continued on for another 6 or 7 weeks to Florida. And so the effectiveness of it is kind of interesting. It's one thing to do it when you're in the race. It's another when you're falling off the stage and going after someone as Chris Christie did then. The other interesting thing is a lot of people are saying, including some of the candidates who are already in the race, are thinking, oh, this will be great. Chris Christie can go head to head and fight the former president. But I'll tell you, the person who is most excited about Chris Christie getting into the race is not any of the other candidates. It's Donald Trump. This is exactly what the former president would like to have on the debate stage. To have a cage match between him and Chris Christie really takes us back to 2016. And that's the kind of election that the former president can actually win. You've got a lot of these other candidates, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and so on, who are looking to have a different kind of conversation. You can't have that conversation on a debate stage if you got a cage match going on in between.
Right. So Christie essentially playing Donald Trump's game if he wants to face off against him. That's what he likes. But interestingly enough, you've got to look back at these two's past, and it goes back a while, right? He ran against him in 2016, but he knows him better than most, worked with him in 2020, even had some mock debates against him to prepare Trump for the 2020 run. So how can he use that and their past and what he knows behind closed doors to his advantage?
Yeah, I think he'll try to do that. He'll try to use little nuances. He knows the things that gets under former President Trump's skin, so he'll definitely play that game. But again, he is playing into the former president's strength. Donald Trump is a counterpuncher, and if Chris Christie comes out swinging, again, that's no matter what Chris Christie knows or what Chris Christie thinks he can do because of their relationship, which I would say is not really a relationship with the former president. It's always a transaction, and that transaction I think will come up very short for Chris Christie. I also don't think it's good for the conversation for the country.
I want to talk to you about Mike Pence. I know the two of you spoke recently. Why did he say he's running?
You know, really interesting, Marni. I ask a question of every candidate running for any office, whether it's the highest office in the land or a city council seat. I always ask them, campaigns are hard. This is really brutal stuff. What will make all of this worth it, even if you run and lose? Because I think the answer to that question tells us a lot about how they would govern. And when I posed that question to former Vice President Pence, his answer was really interesting. He said it was a sense of duty. And he feels like he's called to do that, not to win necessarily, but to change the conversation, to restore it back. And I think he really relies heavily on what took place on January 6th. And of all the atrocities that took place that day, I think the most historic thing that happened that day was just hours after that breach of the Capitol was when Mike Pence pounded the gavel in the United States Senate and the Republic held and the Constitution and the country moved forward. And so I think Mike Pence feels a calling to at least change the conversation. The path to victory will be very, very difficult. I think he recognizes and understands that, but he does feel that sense of duty to get the conversation back to what it should be about good principles that founded this country and the policy that make it the most extraordinary place on earth.
It's an interesting place, Boyd, because some may ask, why run if you don't think you can win? But we're going to have to leave it there. As always, thank you, Boyd Matheson. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.